I'm Bob from Bob's Workshop. In this longer video, I'm taking a few previous episodes where I repainted and redecorated some Lionel trains to look as if they're in service for the German army during World War II. Now, if you want to find flat cars carrying Sherman tanks or American half-tracks and Jeeps, those are pretty easy to find. You can go online and pick up 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 at Menards anytime you want. But if you want to see the other side of World War II, you might have to do what I did and make your own. So here are some German trains that I decorated, made by Lionel, but they now look like they're in service of the German armed forces from World War II. Here they are. German steam locomotives are not very well represented in the three-rail O-gauge community. But I always thought they looked especially sharp, with their bright red bottoms and the somewhat sinister-looking smoke deflectors at the front. So over the last few months, I've been converting various Lionel and Williams pieces to look like German equipment from the World War II era, and even some locomotives based on the book The Man in the High Castle. In this episode, I'd like to convert a cheap Lionel locomotive into what I think a German switcher may have looked like in the 1940s. There's really not too much to talk about with this train. The shell is made from molded plastic, and any detail that's here is molded in place. The grab rails, steam pipes, and bell are all pretty much just shapeless blobs. This was probably part of a starter set, and a quick eBay search shows that most of these are priced in the $10 to $15 range, and they don't seem to be selling. So I have no problems taking mine apart and changing it into something that is at least more useful and appealing to me. To convert this into something more European, I'll first need to remove the undersized nose coupler and the cowcatcher up front. The rotary tool takes time, and the friction melts some of the plastic along the way, but eventually I end up with a mostly flat area. Sandpaper will finish up the job, and pretty soon it'll be time for adding some of the new stuff.
collection of flat sheet styrene in various thicknesses, this front piece needs to be pretty thick. And all this stuff pretty much cuts like drywall. I score the lines several times, and then it snaps in two. Sand in the edges will straighten everything up, and it'll be ready to be glued onto the shell pretty soon. Plastic weld cement by Plastruct is a solvent that flows between the pieces and bonds them together pretty much permanently. After they've had time to set for a few hours, there's really no getting them apart. So the new plastic up front goes a long way towards making this look European. But it'll be these smoke deflectors that make it German, at least in my mind. This plastic is way thinner than the first kind, and I'll just lightly score it so that I can bend it just a little bit without breaking it into two pieces. I'll add a little bit of reinforcement with some scrap styrene behind the area that's bent, and then cut the upper edge, the front upper edge, at a 45-degree angle. Square plastic tubing is cut at an angle also that pretty closely matches the curve of the locomotive's boiler. These pieces will be the upper supports for the smoke deflectors. A cheap plastic shell is way easier to work with than a die-cast locomotive. It makes attaching any styrene modifications so much easier. The liquid solvent cement flows easily between the parts and forms a quick and sturdy bond. I'm getting close to the point where I can start painting, which is good because I can sometimes get a little impatient with these projects if I don't see noticeable improvement or progress. A few more details were added with leftover plastic scraps, and there already was a sliding door above the cab, but it wasn't very well defined. I like this better, and it was pretty easy to make with just a few plastic pieces. I'm pretty sure that these little round pieces are called something other than bumpers, but I'll use upholstery tacks to replicate them on this locomotive's front end. This is where I start to feel some real satisfaction and gratification for my work. The satin black is the last color that I need to spray, so the finish line is finally in sight. The paint transforms the cheap plastic into a shell that now looks more like painted die cast. It needs to cure for a day or so before I can apply decals and put it all back together. So, thinking about expenses for this project, there really haven't been too many. The locomotive and tender were purchased years ago, and I can't remember the cost. I already owned the cans of spray paint that I used, so those were paid for too, and the decals were leftovers from other builds. If I had to put a number to the whole thing, I'd guess at less than 20 bucks, maybe even less than 15, which is pretty okay. I found this at a local train show for only $10. It's missing a few parts. The smokestack, headlamp, bell, and whistle are long gone, but that's okay because I think I can replace them with plastic parts I'll make. It operates on AC current, but lacks a remote reversing unit. It does run, but it's really noisy. With a little work, I think I can make this 40-year-old locomotive look new again. It won't have its original appearance, but instead will resemble a German switcher from the World War II era. My selection of sheet styrene and plastic tubing should be enough to build the replacement parts. The smokestack will be easy. My Dockside switcher had a large diamond-shaped stack when it was new, but I think that this simpler straight section of pipe looks way better. there's a part that's broken off and missing from the front area too. But that's okay, because I'm adding a flat piece of plastic to make the front end of this locomotive look like so many other European trains. About a month ago, I converted a different Lionel train to German specifications using plastic tubing and upholstery tacks. And now I'll do the same thing here. I'll also trim a few pieces of plastic to plug these openings and even add a couple of steps to both sides. I won't do it now, but I was also thinking about separate handrails made from brass at the front here towards the leading edge in front of the boiler. I may do that later because I'm also thinking about LED lighting, but I haven't figured that out because there's so little room in the shell for a voltage rectifier. LEDs need DC, and this switcher runs on AC. A Dockside switcher is the model I first had in mind when I wanted a German locomotive. It took a while to find one, but I'm glad I waited. It's already starting to look vaguely European, but smoke deflectors on either side of the boiler will define it as German. The original headlamp was non-functional and looked like something from the Old West. My replacement won't light up either, but its basic shape will at least give the impression of a mid-20th century design. I've replaced a few things and added some new stuff, yada yada yada, and now it's time for paint. Lots of train collectors have flat cars full of American Army equipment. Sherman tanks, half-tracks, and jeeps are pretty common, and I like those a lot, but I haven't seen much representation of Germany from World War II. These are a few pieces from my collection which started when I discovered the amount of German fighting vehicles in 1/43rd scale that are now available. And then I discovered the Man in the High Castle series on Amazon Prime. So I started making fantasy trains from the alternate timeline, imagined or created as if the Axis powers had won the Second World War. Which pretty much brings us back to the Lionel Dockside switcher, which now looks really good, but is still really noisy. The cleaning and the lubrication didn't really help very much, did it? I'm a little disappointed. I thought it was going to be a lot quieter. That's okay. It still looks good. And really, this was all about a cosmetic makeover. If it worked better at the end, that would have been great. But I'm still happy with the way this turned out. You may have caught a glimpse of these flat cars earlier. Their conversion into service of the Wehrmacht was much easier than the locomotives. Basically, just a simple respray and decals that were left over from my days of building Panzer kits in 1/35th scale from Tamiya. I think I ended up making 4 of these flat cars, longer ones like this, and then also a few shorter ones. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and until next time, this has been Bob's Workshop. Take care.